Reflections. Hiya Monstaz, and thanks for stopping by. I hope you have your blanket ready. Well, you don't? Well, you should go get it already, because we have 5 scary stories that may help you fall asleep tonight. And Monstaz, have you subscribed yet? Well, if you haven't, be sure to do so. And if you want to, you can also follow YeahManTV on Twitter at YeahManTV. And also Monstaz, if you guys have any stories you would like to submit to YeahManTV, you can email those to yeahmantelevision at gmail.com. Well, okie dokie Monstaz, let's get right into it and let the stories begin. Do Not Enter, written by Random Fellow. When I first moved into my apartment, the landlord told me a strange thing. Always check that the room is the right one before entering. Great advice from a master of the obvious, you might say. Truth be told, I hadn't really been paying much attention up to that point. My landlord was the type of woman that put no effort into sounding happy to meet you, and whatever Eastern European accent she had certainly didn't make it any easier to understand. I probably should have asked a few more questions, but signing a lease wasn't a process I wanted to prolong any longer than I had to. Besides, it's not like I really needed an explanation. My early childhood diet didn't consist exclusively of paint chips after all. For how cheap the rent was, I wasn't about to worry over a bad joke. The place was one of those oddities of design that seemed to suck the fun out of everything anyway. Nothing but a series of copy and paste apartments stacked on top of each other over 13 laborers' floors. Each one was practically identical, right down to the way the front door stuck when it rained. Not a single window among them. They even came furnished with appliances and furniture devoid of any particular style or taste. It's like living in a filing cabinet, sterile and lacking of life of its own. You'd think we all lived in alphabetical order and referred to each other by apartment numbers. My accountant would love this place. As dull as the accommodations were, it didn't take more than a month for things to get interesting. They were little things at first, mostly just noises. Nothing too sinister, but they did a great job keeping me up at night. One night I could hear whispering coming from my neighbor's bathroom that lasted for hours. The next, I swear I heard far-off wolf-like howls from the floor above, despite the enforced no pets policy. Once I even caught this unmistakable sound of crashing waves on a sandy beach from an apartment, on the 6th floor. Occasionally, I would hear the noises coming from rooms in my own apartment. However, nothing would be out of place when I checked, and I may have forgotten to mention that I live alone. It had taken a bit longer for anything really strange to happen though. It was like 4 months into my stay when the sounds of clinking glass and slamming cabinets woke me. It came from the kitchen, and I just knew I had an intruder. I quietly slipped out of bed and grabbed my aluminum baseball bat I kept next to the door to remind me how I really should get some exercise. I must have looked absolutely ridiculous tiptoeing down my carpeted hallway to the kitchen, with how much noise the intruder was making. When I reached the doorway to my kitchen, I chanced to peek inside. Sure enough, I saw a dark figure furiously rooting through my kitchen cabinets. Tightening my grip on the baseball bat, I flipped on the light switch. Lucky thing I did too, otherwise I might have beaten an innocent old woman to death. My midnight intruder startled at the sight of me, with her wrinkled face twisted into a mixture of fright and confusion. The unassuming dirty dressing gown and fluffy pink slippers she wore seemed an odd choice for a burglar. I recognized the woman. She was the old lady who lived 2 doors down from me. I even helped her with her groceries that very evening. After managing to calm the poor woman down and assuring her that she was not in fact in her own flat, my elderly neighbor apologized. She had woken up in the middle of the night craving a cup, she explained, and must have gotten lost in the dark, unlit building. How she managed to slip into my apartment without either of us noticing was beyond me. She must suffer from dementia because she was absolutely convinced that she was still in her own. I don't think she understood just how close she came to a baseball bat to the head, and I wasn't in the mood to explain it to her. I tried to be as polite and understanding as I could, and I escorted her back to her apartment. But something was bothering me. Something about the whole affair made the little hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It wasn't until I locked my front door behind me that I realized what it was. Before going to bed, I remember quite clearly locking the doors from the inside. I racked my brain all night, but I just couldn't explain how the old woman could have wandered into my apartment without opening my front door. Having no one else to ask, I decided to bring the subject up to my next door neighbor the next day. Cornering him in the hallway that evening, I had trouble broaching the subject. When I finally stammered out the story, however, he seemed really unsurprised by the whole ordeal. Apparently, this sort of thing happened all the time, not just to the old lady down the hall either. Almost everyone in the building had a similar tale. It was the doors, he said. They didn't always lead to the same place. Sometimes you would be facing a door that led to your bathroom, only for it to lead to your bedroom instead. It could even lead to a completely different apartment on a completely different floor. Once, he heard that someone's closet had once opened to an alley on the north side of the building. It was a pretty crazy thing to think that your door could lead anywhere in the building without notice, but my neighbor seemed to believe that the phenomenon stretched farther than that. To get around this little nuisance, he suggested I do what the other tenants do. The generally accepted method was to make 2 marks on either side of each doorway in the apartment, with a marker. That way, you could tell if the room you were about to enter was the right one at glance. If the 2 marks didn't match up, you were staring at a doorway to the unknown. Well, at least that was the idea. The old lady must have forgotten to check when she stepped into my kitchen, or at least not seen it in the dark. My neighbor seemed rather annoyed by the thought. He made it painfully clear that I wait for the door to go back to normal before using it. I should, under no circumstance, ever enter a room that shouldn't be there. Always check first. My neighbor experienced the anomaly himself in the past, but only has a mild annoyance. Even still, he was very adamant that I take the matter seriously. But how could I? Who in their right mind would believe a story as insane as this? Sure, it could explain how the old lady down the hall got into my apartment without using my door, but it created all sorts of other questions. And the last thing I wanted to question were the laws of physics. Mass hysteria, it had to be. A building filled to bursting with lunatics. In the end, I found it simpler to write my neighbor off as a head case and moved on with my life. However, I did as he suggested, with a red Sharpie secretly. I drew a line on each side of the door jamb in my apartment. It was more out of curiosity than anything else. Or maybe I was just daring the universe to prove me wrong. Either way, after a few weeks, I got into the habit of checking if both marks were there before I entered a room. I saw it as a little inside joke. When in Rome, do as the wackos do. Eventually, it became a silly little ritual I would do to remind myself that the world wasn't crazy. Just the guy next door. I'd been living in my apartment for a little over a year before it happened to me again. I had gotten up in the middle of the night and used the bathroom like I'd done many times before. I was on autopilot. On my way back to my bed, I lifted my tired eyes to the doorway leading to the bedroom and grinned at the now familiar red. But I hesitated. There was only one mark. Though only lit by a small lamp in the hallway, I was absolutely sure there was no red mark on the bedroom side of my door. I stood there for a while, blinking sleep from my eyes and trying to stare the second mark back into existence. The bedroom looked the same as I'd left it minutes before, save for the missing mark on the doorway. Were my eyes playing tricks on me? Maybe I was dreaming. Or my kooky neighbor's story was the real deal. I was sure of one thing. There had been 2 marks on my trip to the bathroom. I didn't go in right away. I wanted to, but a small part of me took what my neighbor told me seriously. Well, first I waved an empty hand in the doorway. Nothing really spooky happened. Embottled by the knowledge that this phantom room wouldn't immediately melt my skin off, I took a step inside. Well, at first glance, nothing looked out of the ordinary. Everything was where I remember leaving it. Even my comforter was thrown to the side like I'd just been sleeping under it minutes before. But then why was the mark missing from my doorframe? I was certain there had been something different about this room. In that moment, my neighbor didn't seem so crazy, and all I needed to prove it was to find what was wrong with my room. I tore open the closet and flipped my mattress in search of clues. Every drawer was emptied on the floor in my quest. I even tore the carpets up at the ends to look underneath. I looked everywhere in my madness, but found nothing. Everything was where it should be. Somehow, though, I knew this wasn't my bedroom. And it wasn't until I turned back to the door to check if the second mark was really missing that I realized what was different about it. This room had no doors. 2 a.m. Written by the Countess of Creepy. I don't remember falling asleep, but I know that I must have, because I woke up feeling startled. I'm not sure if there was a reason I woke up with my heart beating out of my chest. Maybe the reason is that I just realized I was sleeping. I put down my gun so I can drink some water out of one of the old nearby bottles. I got the bottle to my lips when the sound of the doorbell fills the room. Now I remember. I heard the doorbell in my sleep. My mouth went dry and I think about taking a swig from the water bottle, but I think better of it. I recapped the bottle and put it down and pick up my gun. I looked at the clock, 2 a.m. I know whoever was at the door is not here to help me. I stand and I look out the door. The doorbell rings again. I just blink at the door while holding my gun at my side and pointing to the floor with the safety off, ready if I need it. I thought back to when I woke up. I struggled through the haze of sleep deprivation to remember when I was last awake. I remember checking the food and water supply then. I made sure the barricades over the doors and windows were holding up and undamaged. I know I finished my checks at 11 p.m. I remember sitting down on the sofa. Then I remember waking up now. I was asleep for nearly 3 hours. That was the longest stretch of sleep I've had in weeks. The doorbell rang out again and I lost my train of thought. Then I heard something that made me want to run away and hide, but I also want to throw the door open in alarmingly equal measures. Will? It's my mother's voice coming from the other side of the door. William, honey, it's me, Mom. Her voice was rough and had an edge to it that it never had before, but I could tell it was her. I backed away from the door. My mom was one of the first people infected in our town of Hanover. She had been traveling across the country. On her way home, she had a layover in New York. That's where the authorities thought the bioweapon was released. But no one knew it was released until weeks after the outbreak started. My mom started to feel sick days after arriving home from her trip. We had no idea that what she came down with was serious. The local doctors were confused about what was wrong with her. Then the news of the outbreak hits the national and local news. By the time the CDC came to Hanover, my mom was dead. But like all the people who died of this new illness, she came back. Unlike her true self, she came back as a violent monster. William, let me in. I jumped. I was lost for a second in my musing of the past. Her voice started to sound more gurgle and took on a terrifying edge. It took me a second to pull my thoughts together. I remember it wasn't long after my mother died before the infected were everywhere, attacking and infecting other people. The healthy people left in town barricaded their doors and windows and tried to wait for help. I'm not sure how many are still left. I can't remember the last time I heard the hammering of survivors repairing their barricades. William! My mother shouted and started kicking the door. I jumped and took another step away from the door. Any remaining humanity in her voice disappeared when she shouted. I looked around myself. I'm running out of things to repair the barricades with. I have about a dozen bottles of water left, most half empty. I maybe have enough food to last the next 3 days at most. Only 2 bullets were left in my gun, and I had no extra ammo. I know I won't last much longer, but more than anything, I want to see my mom one last time. Mom? I called out. She stopped kicking at the door. Will? Open the door, Will. Humanity rushed back to her voice. She almost sounded like my mom. My healthy mom. Okay, Mom. Give me a second. With the gun in my hand, I went to the door and removed the barricade. I opened the door and there was my mom. Her hair's a mess with leaves and twigs sticking out of it. She is wearing her hospital gown, but now it's covered in mud and blood. She takes a shuffling step towards me. I open my arms as if she's coming in for a hug. She isn't. I know that. But it's okay. She is right in front of me, and I wrap my arms around her. For a second, it was like having her back. The hug felt so good. Then, as I knew she would, she bit into my shoulder. The pain was worse than I ever felt. I put the gun up to her head and fired. She sagged against me. I couldn't hold her up much longer, so I let her fall. I put the gun up to my head, and with the last bullet, I pulled the trigger. But just before my life ended, I heard gunfire and voices calling out for survivors. Not the ending you're expecting. Written by Linear Equalist. Several years ago, my family lived in a sketchy area of a small town in South Carolina. Our neighbor 2 doors down was a well-known drug dealer, and there were always shady people walking up and down our street and through our yard late at night. Now my fiance is a night owl, and I work nights, so we were always up late. My daughters weren't in school yet, and thankfully liked to sleep in as much as we did. So it wasn't uncommon for him or I to be up at 2 or 3 in the morning watching TV and playing internet poker. We didn't have curtains or blinds on most of the windows, so it was obvious that we were awake and in the brightly lit living room that late at night. Everyone in the neighborhood was also familiar with our 2 oversized German Shepherd dogs. Our female was around 160 pounds and our male was around 120. They could also both be seen through the window at night by anyone looking. So for a few weeks, we'd been having issues with hearing sounds outside at night. But when we went to check it, typically the person would be gone, and we'd find nothing but a pry bar near the window where they'd been trying to get in. By the time we moved from that neighborhood, we had a collection of them that we'd found around the outside of our house. What couldn't be seen through the windows was that my fiance had drilled holes through both wooden frames of each window, and then had them held in place with 3-inch nails so that they couldn't be opened without taking the nails out of the holes. One night, we were sitting in the living room around 3 in the morning, and we hear a sound at the window directly between our 2 computers. The dogs were sitting in front of the window just growling and staring out. And when we looked outside, we could see a guy trying to pry the window open. We both stood in front of the window, staring at him. The dogs were barking, but he was just so drugged up apparently he didn't notice any of us there until my fiance knocked on the window. He ran off, and my fiance headed out to collect his pry bar. We figured that would be the end of it, but the next night, the same guy was at it again, at a different window in the living room. The process repeated, with my fiance knocking on the window and scaring him off, and then collecting the crowbar. When he showed up the 3rd night, we decided we had enough. This time, instead of knocking on the window, my fiance went outside without alerting him. So this is what the guy trying to break into the house saw. First, my fiance steps onto the porch. Now he's 6'5" but skinny, and uses a cane a large portion of the time, so despite his height, he appears pretty non-threatening. When the guy noticed him there, he didn't try to run this time, apparently thinking he could take him. They stared each other down for a few moments, and when the guy raised the pry bar like he was going to move towards my fiance, all hell broke loose. My fiance, despite using a cane, is fast when he needs to be. In an instant, he popped open the front door, releasing both of the dogs at the same time, and pulled a machete out of the back of his pants and took off after the guy. So here this guy thinks he's got an easy target, only to be chased down by nearly 300 combined pounds of snarling teeth and muscle and a crazy skinny white guy with a machete. I'd never seen someone run so fast. All I can say is, housebreaking drug addict guy, for your sake, I hope we never meet again. Webcam Offline, written by As Afterlife. Love can be an intoxicating emotion. It has the remarkable ability to completely render useless any course of coherent thought, making the feeling of love truly blind. Most would do anything for the ones they love, even if it results in their tragic end. Once you find your soulmate, you'd want to be with them so badly that not even death can separate you. I sat, staring out of the frost-covered window of my apartment, my laptop casting its fluorescent light onto the glass, causing a dual image of my surroundings to reflect back into my eyes. Just as I was beginning to lose myself within my daydream, I heard a loud bing coming from my computer. Someone had messaged me in the chat room. I turned my attention to the screen and smiled when I saw the username DarkRaven93. For about 5 months now, we've been in a serious relationship. The only problem is that I had not yet seen her face. Tonight, that was gonna change. We arranged a webcam meeting for 9:00 p.m. It was now 8:43. A message came up from DarkRaven93. Hey, sorry I'm so early, I just couldn't wait to talk to you. Hope that's okay. I then replied, no need to apologize, we are dating after all. I'm actually glad you messaged me. She then replied back, I'm so happy to hear that. I'm setting up my webcam now. I'm so excited. I haven't used this thing for a while now. I hope it still works. Cool, I set mine up an hour ago. Ha, mine's pretty old too. I responded back. An hour ago? You must really want to see me, huh? BRB, have to go grab a USB cable for this thing. DarkRaven93 then went offline. I felt so lucky to have someone like her. She was so vibrant, so lively. To be honest, I wouldn't care if I ever saw her face. Her personality is what made me fall in love with her. I stared at the clock. It was now 8:54. Only 6 minutes until we'd finally get to see each other for the first time. The minutes ticked away and I was beginning to get a bit antsy. The moment I heard that all too familiar bing, my heart suffocated inside my chest. It was 8:59. DarkRaven93 then responds, Hey, I'm back. Miss me? I sure did. Got everything set up? She then said, Yep, took a bit longer than I thought it would. I definitely have no future in the tech business. Okay, calling you now. Get ready. A chat box popped up with the words, DarkRaven93 is calling you. Do you accept? I quickly clicked accept and heaved a deep breath. She was beautiful. Her long, wavy black hair flowed past her shoulders. Her pale skin radiated with a pink hue from the dim lighting of her laptop. Her eyes glowed a soft green, and her lips were stained with the bright shade of red. She was stunning. I felt luckier than I had a few moments ago. So, what do you think? Is it how you imagined I look? She flashed a smile as vicious as I envisioned it to be. I think you're beautiful. I managed to stutter out the words with a shaky vibration in my voice. She began to laugh, which managed to make me even more nervous than before. Well, you're not too bad yourself. She paused for a moment, biting loosely into her bottom lip. I'm glad we finally got to see each other. Yeah, me too. We continued talking for a while and it was quite enjoyable. We talked about our hopes and dreams, our plans for the future, We even talked about chances of us moving in together if the circumstances ever allowed it. Everything was going the way I thought it would, until her laptop began to glitch. A distorted image of her beautiful face was now presented before me. A loud static echoed from the speaker as she tried to speak. "Hey, I think there's something wrong with your webcam. It's completely blurred. I can't see you at all. The audio is pretty bad as well." Well, she tried to speak against the static, but it was swallowing her words like a boa gobbling up its prey. I was just about to type in the chat when a horrifying image burst onto the screen. It screamed a deafening scream that threatened to shatter my eardrums. I quickly backed away from the laptop, gazing at the screen in pure terror. Her webcam quickly shut off, and she went offline. But not a minute later, the chat box reappeared on the screen. It was from DarkRaven93. "Hey, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. We were just getting to the good stuff, then my webcam malfunctioned out of nowhere." I then replied, "That's fine, but what was that?" DarkRaven93 then said, "What was what?" Before I could type an answer, a video chat request had popped up on my screen. It was from her. I hesitantly hit accept. I regretted the decision almost instantly. What showed on the screen wasn't her, but a car. My old car. The car had gotten into an accident almost 4 years ago. How was she filming it? I had the car scrapped right after the accident. I couldn't pay for the repairs. The image quickly changed to a photo of a woman lying on a gurney. Her face was mangled, her jaw almost separated from her face, her body twisted out of proportion. Couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was my ex-girlfriend. The day of the accident, she was with me. We'd been drinking that night. She warned me not to drive, but I thought I could do it. She died almost instantly after we crashed. I panicked. I didn't want to go to prison for causing her death, so I covered it up. I dragged her body to a trench far from the crash site and covered the hole before notifying the cops of the accident. We were in the middle of nowhere. I knew it would be easy to get away with it. Over time, I was able to forget about what I'd done, but it never really left me. I told her parents that she ran away after an argument. I even participated in the searches for her. They never found her body. Well, everyone looked at me as a suspect, but without proper evidence. I was relieved of suspicion. The tears I had tried so hard to hold back came rushing out. The image of her body was too much to bear. Dark Raven's face appeared on the screen. She stared blankly into her webcam, smiling just a bit too widely. Her face began to glitch, shifting between my ex's disfigured features and her disturbing absent stare. "What do you want from me? Why are you doing this?" She said nothing. "What? Do you want an apology? Well, fine. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean for you to die. I'm sorry I covered it up. If I could do anything to change this, I would." She unhinged her mouth. It switched between my ex's tattered jaw and Raven's intact one. "I just want to be with you. I came back because I love you. We were going to be together forever. We still can." Her voice sounded as though she was trapped in a matrix. She glanced over in the direction of my pocket knife. My eyes widened. "I'm not going to kill myself for you." "But don't you love me?" Her voice deepened, almost sounding demonic. "Make up for what you did. Set things right." She began to raise her decrepit hand to the screen and slowly pushed through it. I screamed, falling backwards in my chair and cowered in fear on the ground. I felt her cold, dead fingers touch the bare flesh on my face, and I froze in terror. Please stop. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I could feel her hand retreating from my face. Then I heard that all too familiar bing. I slowly stood up from the floor and looked at the screen. It was DarkRaven93. Her words sent chills down my spine. "Hey, I tried video chatting you, but it says your webcam is offline." There was something knocking at my door, written by Unique Individual 20. This happened to me about 2 years ago, nearing the end of September. My aunt and a friend decided to fly up to New York from Panama to enjoy their mini vacation with my parents and I. Although many strange and paranormal experiences have happened to me ever since I was little, this event stayed with me and affected me more than any other experience. And here's the thing, many things have happened to a lot of my family members, especially my aunt and her friend. We'll get back to that later though. So it was around 10:30 at night, and keep in mind that my old neighborhood was a very calm and quiet place. Since I live near the countryside, not much action happens in the neighborhoods. Now, the neighborhoods were either elderly or young couples with smaller children, none that caused trouble around the neighborhood. There were about 25 houses in the entire neighborhood that I lived in. Now, moving on, the three of us decided to stay up late to watch scary movies while my parents slept upstairs in the room. My aunt's friend was sitting near the sliding doors leading to the backyard while my aunt and I were sitting on the bigger couch near the front door. I was sitting on the left side where the door faced, and my aunt sat on the right side of me, which meant I was closest to the front door. We spent about 10 minutes debating on which movie we should watch. After those 10 minutes, we finally chose to watch Aunt Thomas, which wasn't really scary, but it was about a guy who could see spirits and demons. What a coincidence. We were only 2 minutes into the movie when I had a sudden urge to look at the door. I glanced back at my aunt and her friend, only to see them staring at the door as well. I looked back at the door for about 5 seconds. Then a loud bang came, and then another one following after that, and then a third one. All 3 bangs came from the front door, almost as if 5 people had just body slammed into the door 3 times. I thought it was gonna fly off the freaking frame. My first instinct was to run to the kitchen and grab a knife, but as I was about to do that, my aunt grabbed me by my shirt and told me to stay down. As I looked to the right, I saw my aunt's friend with her knees to her chest rocking herself back and forth while my aunt just kept her gaze towards the door, while all 3 of us kept our attention to the door. Next to it there were 2 small rectangular windows on either side of the door. The right window had a small curtain, and on the left side was being covered with a small decorative tree. The small curtain had a gap in between it, and because it was glued onto the window from the top area to the bottom area, leaving the middle part loose. Now, at the moment of the bangs, it caused the middle area of the curtain to pop up slowly, and then quickly press against the window, leaving it wrinkled. Now, after that, we were silent, all of us terrified. My aunt denied being scared, but at the moment I could see nothing but fear in her eyes. I wanted to run upstairs to get my parents, but I was too afraid to go up the stairs because it was right next to the front door. All I could do was text and call them, but they were too deep in their slumber to hear their phones ring. My aunt told the 2 of us to calm down and dismissed it as the wind. We all knew it couldn't have been, but in order to stay calm, she made up that excuse. And I say that's totally cliche. The next morning I told my mother about the previous events. She brushed it off by saying it must have been a bear or a deer, another cliche thing to say. We both went outside to inspect and found my mom's decorations near the front door thrown off the side. There were no scratch marks or bumps on the door. Everything seemed normal except for her decorations laying on the side. When the 3 of us looked at the door the night of the event, there wasn't anything that could have caught our attention. Since the woods were 40 meters away from my house, we would have heard the trees moving with the wind, but we heard nothing. The movie was playing at the same time, but it was strange how we all felt the sudden urge to look at the door, almost as if we knew something was about to happen. The bangs were extremely loud and caused me to jump up from the couch. It couldn't have been kids playing a prank on me because I'd been living out here for about 3 years and nothing like this had ever happened. Plus, I knew the neighbors well enough to know that they would never do such a thing like that. There were exactly 3 bangs, one after the other. One could have honestly caused the door to fly out of place, but thank God it didn't. What about the curtain? The only explanation we could come up with that was that the impact of the bangs created the wind, causing the curtain to react that way. But why did it inflate slowly if the bangs were rapid and then suddenly cause it to go against the window so fast after the bangs were over? My aunts think that the wind must have been knocked off, of course. That's why they didn't hear the trees moving and created huge columns of winds that must have caused the door to move. The gust of wind must have gotten inside the house from the cracks of the door, leading the curtain to poof up. Personally, it doesn't make sense and it sounds like total BS to me. But she doesn't have an explanation for that. I didn't see a shadow outside though. My mother came up with an excuse as well. She said it might have been a deer or a bear. But why would a deer or a bear bang their head or entire body for that matter into the door? Like I previously said, there were no scratch marks to prove that this was an animal. No animal could have caused those 3 loud bangs. We've had deer sightings in that neighborhood before, but none of them have acted in such a strange behavior. Usually they all run back into the woods. Bears, well, they're out of the question. Not once have there ever been a sighting of them. I should also mention that we had the lights from outside on. Why would an animal come that close to a house, especially a door that is clearly being illuminated by light? Like I said before, animals in general are out of the question. As I mentioned before, my aunt along with my mother had experienced many unexplained events, and they believe in the paranormal. I think the only reason they tried to make up an excuse for this situation was to prevent me from becoming paranoid and afraid. Well, it's pretty late for that now since I've had a lot of my fair shares of experiences as well. Now to my aunt's friend. My aunt told me that when her friend was younger, she suffered from really bad night terrors. She said she saw things, demonic entities as she described them. She would wake up screaming and crying. It was traumatizing to her. Her family had always been religious and they prayed for her every night, and slowly those things haunted her went away as she grew up. That really creeped me out and led me to believe that she might have brought or attracted that thing to my house. Or maybe it could have been something else. I hope this never happens to me again.
Bah. All of a sudden, it stopped. I heard a scratching again at the door. I knew who it was. It was the cat.